In the year 2020, I started a podcast about movies. Some episodes occasionally focused on other media as well. As I dealt with threatening interdimensional beings, I eventually met my other self from another universe where all the stuff I talked about got delayed. As it turns out, the stories as me and my guests described them were presented very differently in that other universe. So I continued podcasting these recaps, which apparently sound like improvised reviews, to entertain listeners of that other universe while they waited for the new release dates. Some episodes even focused on content of years past that did not come out in that other universe for whatever reason. The year is 2022. The podcast is now bi-weekly, unless stated otherwise. My name is Steven Shinder, and you're listening to Delayed Replay. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe, but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, as always, Steven Shinder, and joining me once again, you've probably heard him on some other episodes, and we're talking about Evil Dead Rise, the HBO Max movie that came out this October in our universe. It is Mr. Multiverse. How's it going, dude?
It's going great, man. It's happy to be on the show. It's actually, I think it's been a while since I've been on here.
Yeah, because I think it was possibly the Shazam 2 episode, or maybe it was like the Spider-Verse one. I can't even remember. It's been a while. In either case, it's great to have you back again. And yeah, so I guess we'll just get right into it. So we're talking about Evil Dead Rise. Overall, what have been like your experiences and your history with the Evil Dead franchise?
For me, it was kind of funny because like this is a recurring thing with me for some reason. I always see the sequels first before I see the first movie. So for me, I watched Army of Darkness, and then I watched them all backwards. Which, in hindsight, you could watch these all in order, and it wouldn't hurt. But this franchise, people say, "Oh, it's overhyped. It's too, it's just slapstick, and it's there's nothing to it." It's like, yeah, but this is good directing. This is good. This was the first movie that really balanced horror and comedy so well.
Yeah, I kind of got into it out of order as well. I remember it was either in 8th grade or 9th grade. It was maybe 2009 or 2010. I was surfing through channels late at night and got to the AMC channel, I think it was. And it was like right in the middle of Evil Dead 2. It was at the scene where Ash is trying to shoot the severed hand and it gives him the middle finger, and then you have the whole laughing lamp scene, and like with no context, I thought to myself, what the hell did I get myself into? And I had to like go to the TV Guide channel to find out what the hell this movie was, and it said Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn, and so I watched the rest of it while it was airing, and then sometime later, maybe like several months later, I caught the end of the first movie on like one of those 300s channels, and then eventually I finally watched the first two in full, and then rented Army of Darkness on DVD from Netflix like back in 2010, and you could really see how the tone changes between each of them. First one is horror, but with some acting I thought was kind of bad, so it kind of comes off silly at points. And then the second one is a perfect blend of horror comedy, and then the third one's more comedy and wasn't really to my liking in some respects. Like I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like there's a really great essay about this, which I'll link in the show notes, but I feel like Army of Darkness turned Ash into the stereotypical wisecracking a-hole, and it carried over into the video games and the comics, and then I felt like it got worse in the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show, where the characters even say he's a perverted drunk with racist tendencies. So it was hard to see Ash in that show, even though I enjoyed the other characters, like the side characters. And then when that got canceled, I was like, damn, I actually really am interested in the direction it was going at the end.
It's very much this kind of almost like adult Looney Tunes kind of thing. Bruce Campbell really does know how to sell like slapstick, and also he can. It's basically like what you call Looney Tune in the middle of the most horrible, bloody situation you could imagine.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of a different character in each installment. Like, there's continuity is kind of weird between these things. But of course, there's also the remake or reboot or whatever you want to call it that came out in 2013, and that one was straight up horror. And personally, I thought it surpassed the first movie, and it was really great. What did you think of that 2013 film?
I really enjoyed it. I think it's very underrated, and I do think it doesn't get the love it does because whether you argue it's a remake or in continuity or whatever, I do think it is a film that sets out not only to be a good Evil Dead film, but it is also, I think, a decent remake. I do think there are some things does get lost in the shuffle. But at the same time, I feel like the cast carries it, and I think the effects team really just knocks it out of the park in that film.
Yeah, I agree. The effects were great, and I really bought into like the brother sister. Like there was like a lot of emotion in how that storyline played out, and there were a couple like remember this type of moments, but there weren't too many, and they were like so satisfying when they actually happened. I felt like visually and aesthetically it did a good job making itself its own thing while honoring what came before, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I guess with that we can get into Evil Dead Rise. So how self-contained and accessible would you say this film is for newcomers?
I think it's very self-contained. I think it is. I think it's a film that, and that's the thing about most Evil Dead films is that they all feel like you could make the argument they're all standalone in some capacity. And this is very much in that vein where it feels like it could be, a starting point for someone who's never seen an Evil Dead film. And it is kind of funny, and I think we'll go into it more, is that this film, and I don't know if you've seen this movie I'm about to reference, but there's an Italian film called Demons 2.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that.
It's a Italian horror film, and it's actually a sequel as well. And it actually, the premise is a lot like this, where it's a supernatural possession film taking place in an apartment complex. And it was funny too because I don't think anyone mentioned it, but I was watching this movie and then I was thinking, wait a minute, I feel like I've seen this before. It's like, wait, this is Demons 2.
Yeah, because this movie, Evil Dead Rise, does take place in an apartment complex. There are two sisters. One's name is Beth, who's like on the road and whatnot, traveling and stuff. And she visits her older sister, Ellie, who is raising 3 kids. And it's in this like LA apartment. It's kind of interesting that they carry that thread of the whole sibling thing, like kind of thematic parallels with the 2013 film. And I feel like it's something that kind of got lost with the Bruce Campbell films, because with the second movie you get the recap that omits some characters. You kind of forget he has a sister until she comes back in the TV show. But yeah, what'd you think of the sister dynamic here?
I do think the dynamic among the characters is really good. I do think that the family thing hasn't really been done for the Evil Dead franchise outside of the remake, the 2013 film. You can make the argument, what about Ash and his sister? Well, they never really play into that, really. They never really played into it. Here, this is more of 2 sisters who have not seen each other for a long time. They are from very opposite ends, and they're both thrown in this situation that is, for lack of a better word, scary as hell.
Oh, yeah. Because, the kids are, like, sort of exploring the apartment complex, and, like, deep down in like the basement or of the building they find the Necronomicon for this film. What'd you think of the design for this one?
I really liked it. I really liked the new design. It's very fleshy. It actually is kind of funny because it very much reminded me, and you're gonna laugh, it reminded me a bit of the book from Hocus Pocus.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's funny because I was rewatching well, I'd only seen like Hocus Pocus once before, surprisingly, but I rewatched it recently and then watched the second movie that like just came out on Disney Plus recently. And yeah, as I was watching, I was like, this book kind of reminds me of the Necronomicon because it has like the eyeball and stuff, and yeah, so really interesting parallels there, I guess.
Yeah, where's that crossover, Disney?
Yeah, for real. Yeah, I guess that would be like kind of complicated to do because like there have been various companies involved with the Evil Dead franchise, so like I kind of wonder how much paperwork they'd have to do with all that. But anyway, yeah, I thought it was weird how the kids aren't that creeped out about the book right away. They're kind of just like, oh, this is a really cool looking book. It looks so authentic. I wonder what material they use for this.
I thought that was weird. It was like, oh, it's a creepy book. I'm like, well, to be fair, I've seen some creepier stuff that kids love in Spirit of Halloween, so I was like, I can accept this.
It was kind of annoying to me because it's like, okay, if someone's gonna read the book or something, like we've seen this happen before. How's this gonna play out? So, like, what'd you think of how long it took for basically haunted house vibes starting? Like, how long that took?
I didn't mind it. I'm kind of used to. I am kind of used to the franchise sometimes taking its time. I will admit, though, that I feel like they should have done at least a few more scares because at least out in the woods, there was like stuff out there trying to call out to everyone in the cabin. I feel like we should have done more here. I mean, there are some few scares here and there in this movie, but they're not like there's not like this aura of dread. It feels more like we're kind of doing jump scare territory. I was like, no, you're better than this. Don't, please.
Yeah, because well, for this movie, Sam Raimi was like he handpicked Lee Cronin to write and direct this, so like I was really unfamiliar with him. The only other feature film he had done was The Hole in the Ground, which I've never seen at all or heard of like before this. It was quite different getting the feel of his stamp on this, and yeah, there were more jump scares, so I was kind of annoyed by that.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. What did you think of the set, the apartment itself? Were you like, ugh, we're doing an apartment, why can't it be out in the open? Or do you like the kind of urban aesthetic?
I feel like sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Like, I think it worked whenever they were in a stairwell, because, like, the elevator broke and they couldn't use it, so they had to, like, go up the really dark stairwell type of thing. Sometimes it went through, like, a dark hallway, and I kind of felt like there were Shining vibes, but other times I felt like the hallways were too well lit, and when the lights would flicker, it just wouldn't work, because the lights were, like, yellow, and so they felt too vibrant to me and not really dim and scary. Like in those instances, the zoom in shots didn't really work for me. So I feel like I was mixed on this, but what about you?
I've always liked the idea of like putting a horror setting in the middle of a city because it's like the scare, like a scary thing of, yeah, you're trapped but you could go outside and call someone, but who's going to believe you? Like, but there's always like a walk the line kind of thing. It was like, all right, how do you make the haunting work in the middle of a city that someone could look through the window and go, hey, weird stuff's going on that end?
Because if you're in a city, it's like it really makes you wonder how many people are like looking out their window and seeing what's going on in the next window.
Now, I will say that this movie does do the smart thing of explaining why people don't see what's going on in the building, is because the Necronomicon is kind of like put like a shroud over it to make it look like everything's normal, but you look through that veil, it's twisted and whatnot.
Yeah, it's basically looks like an illusion from the outside, almost like it's turning the inside of the building into another dimension or something. And yeah, I bought into it because I feel like over the course of the like 40 or so years, like the mythology of the Necronomicon and what it's capable of has changed so much, and there's not really any consistency really, so it's kind of like Yeah, the book will just do whatever it needs to do for the story type of thing, if that makes sense.
If you've been an Evil Dead fan for long enough, you just accept that the book's just a plot device that can do whatever the hell it wants.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, the lack of consistency in Evil Dead is the consistency at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like, people saying, "Oh, well, the Force can't do that," and I'm like, "Yeah, the Force can be whatever it wants to be, like whatever the writers need it to be." It's kind of that same premise.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I thought that it would be a bit more consistent and limited when they were trying to build this new canon or whatever for Star Wars. And I think to an extent there are limitations, but with the Force they've done things that I never thought they would do, like in the new canon. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm just, it can do whatever, I guess, and for better or worse, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what'd you think of how this movie handled the overall tone of the story?
I do like that we go a little bit darker. I know some people were hoping for some comedic stuff, and there is some dark comedy from the Deadites, but that's to be expected. This movie isn't afraid to kill off kids.
Yeah, it was really shocking, but kind of expected because of how dark the Evil Dead movies can get. But well, I do like how when they do get killed off, it like there are comedic moments in the movie, but when that does happen, it's treated with a lot of seriousness and like, oh, the stakes have been upped, and they really like the music intensifies. I really love the music throughout the movie. Like, I think that's one of the strong points of this, with the intensifying violins, and it just feels so Evil Dead.
Yeah. I also like how, like, there's one moment where they're playing Hell is for Children, and I was like, whoever picked that on the soundtrack, you need a raise.
Right, yeah. Can you imagine if there was like some random sequence where Running Up That Hill started playing instead?
Yeah, it's almost like it would be a scene that would be pointless and have no weight on the main story, and also just be remembered for having that song.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's no studio that would do that. Depend on 80s nostalgia music, as well as, having a storyline that's gone on too long and be completely pointless to everyone, and is also, like, not even to the point where the cast even cares. That's beside the point.
Yeah, no, there's no way there'd be some sort of streaming show like that, right?
Yeah. Those things seem pretty strange, don't you think?
Yeah, that's the thing. Something like that would be stranger than expected.
Stranger Things. There, I said it.
Yeah. in case people couldn't decipher what we were saying. Yeah, like I enjoyed the first two seasons. The first one was the best one and could have stood on its own, but then the third one was so member berries that I stopped caring about the characters for season 4, basically.
Yeah. It's also getting to the point where even the actors don't look like they care, but that's beside the point.
Right, yeah, I mean, I feel like they do care, but it's just, it doesn't have me, really, but anyway, I'm glad it's finally gonna end. But yeah, in Evil Dead Rise, I also like how they even have some of the neighbors in the apartment complex, like a couple of them are pretty mean, and it's like they're basically fodder for all this Deadite possession stuff, and it does get a bit over the top ridiculous when one of them jams a fork into like where their hand used to be, and it's like, oh, okay, that's our little tip of the hat to the whole chainsaw hand thing, I guess.
Yeah, I do think it does kind of get a little, kind of get bloated with all the characters too, because like I get that this is a apartment complex and a high rise and all that, but like we don't need this many characters.
I feel like what really worked about the first two Evil Dead movies and the remake was the lower amount of characters. With Army of Darkness, to me, it felt like, apart from it being like having too much daylight, it felt like there were just too many characters to really care about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and to an extent, I can understand why you did that, because it's like, here we can have a body count, here we can have, a different setting rather than out in the woods, and I respect that. I really do like that. But we don't need 30 different characters and know their names when we know what's going to happen to them. I feel like it's all a little bloated.
Yeah.
You just don't name your characters and, try to give them stories at the last second before they get turned or eviscerated. Just give me sometimes it's okay to have a body count.
Yeah, like, in addition to the neighbors, there's also the doorman, and there's, like, a few maintenance workers, and, like, the landlord and stuff. There's, like, a bunch of people to keep track of in this.
Also, I guess we should talk about the landlord or the owner of the building. I think that, like, can we just say, like, I knew when they brought up the landlord, I was like, I know who it's going to be, and it's the worst kept secret. Yeah, it's Ash.
It was kind of confusing to me, because I'm like, wait, didn't Ash, like, how is he still here, like, given what we saw in the TV show? Like, when does this take place? And it was just kind of confusing, and it felt like one of those moments where the movie's like, yeah, just go with it, like, whatever.
I will chalk it up to, it's just more of a after credit scene where he's on vacation. I guess you could just say, oh, this takes place before season 1, and he's just been on vacation this whole time, or something of that nature. Because, well, actually, you could probably say that this argument is that this is between season 1 and 2, because he gets rich, he makes a ton of money. So you could say, like, he bought a building while he's been chilling in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and it does feel like they try to keep the time period ambiguous, probably for that reason, because there aren't really, like, thankfully, they don't lean into, like, social media and stuff like that too much, so it's almost like, yeah, you can kind of put this anywhere.
And to be fair, Evil Dead fans have argued about continuity since Evil Dead 1 and 2.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I felt like and even the comics, like, rebooted a couple of times to the point where it's like the year in which the original trilogy of Evil Dead takes place would change. Like, it would be in the 80s and then the 90s and then the 2000s, and it was just kind of weird. So yeah, seeing Ash as the landlord, it was weird because, I've said before that Ash feels like a different character in each movie and in the show, and this was kind of another instance of that, where he wisecracks a little bit, but he also feels kind of serious and proper at points. Like, he doesn't play up some of the silliness as much. I think it's because of the tone of this movie, and he even wears, like, an outfit that seems really formal to the point where I questioned where, like, if this is even Ash. It just felt kind of weird the way Bruce Campbell played him here, but I just rolled with it, I guess.
Yeah, I chalked up to, it's just Ash who's just being a typical jerk, and I was accepting of it. Also, I made my brain all happy to see, Bruce Campbell as Ash again. I know it's vapid, but, like, at the same time, can't help but go, Ash.
I mean, Bruce Campbell cameos, like, sometimes they take you by surprise, and it's like you can't help but enjoy them,
And when he drives in to see the building, he drives up in the car. He drives up in the car in every Raimi movie.
Yeah, the 73 Oldsmobile. Yeah, I also thought it was interesting how Beth's car feels like a modern version of that type of car. Like, it doesn't look exactly like it, but when I saw her car, I was like, okay, that's gonna be our reference to the Oldsmobile. But then later in the movie, it's like, oh, okay, we get the actual Oldsmobile. Okay, whatever. I don't know, like, when Ash finally gets into this fight, I kind of felt like he kind of overshadowed the story, being like, it kind of felt like the Luke Skywalker problem to me, but what did you think of it?
Yeah. While you can make the argument that it is feel a little overshadowing and whatnot, it's still, like, to me, it's Bruce Campbell back as Ash. I can't get mad. I know you're expecting, like, something deeper, but like, it just made my monkey brain all happy.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, depending on the person, it'll, different strokes and all that.
Now, to be fair, I would have been a little mad if it was just him doing greatest hits like Swallow This or Come Get Some or, Hail to the King. Thankfully, he doesn't do that at all. Like, they don't make him like a pull string doll.
Yeah, that's a good point. They did show restraint in the Member Berry nostalgia lines. So I'll give him credit for that at least. And to be fair, he does feel very heroic in this. Like, he doesn't feel as selfish as in other portrayals, and helps the sisters figure out like how to fight and whatnot, which, I mean, you could debate the merits of that, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. You can chalk this up to kind of like, now, dang, now I do want that Mad Max kind of Ash thing.
Yeah, like that's a cliffhanger that it's weird because you can kind of take it both ways, because it's like, oh, that's a potential story we could have seen, or you could be like, oh, the story goes on forever and this is just another adventure with like the Mad Max vibe. But yeah, I don't know if we'll get that, but yeah, the fight sequences here, I will say they did a good job with all the gore, and just like, you know, it had that Evil Dead feel where it could be like really terrifying sometimes, but also really over the top ridiculous sometimes, the way it would splatter against a wall and stuff, and like get all over Ash's face. I think they handled the effects pretty well here.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, at least. What was your favorite kill in the movie? I'm curious.
Yeah, my favorite is probably when they're going up against the doorman, and you know, he's in his deadite form, and he's like, I say, who gets to leave? And they're basically, you know, he flies at them, and they have to like, um, you know, they try slamming his head like with the door itself, and it felt reminiscent of Ash's deadite self in the second movie and in the short movie that inspired the films. When his hand, I think, was going the door, and the door, they're trying to slam it against him. So I thought it was effective here, and how, you know, whenever he got slammed, black blood would just spill out and get all over the place. And it also got back to that claymation type of feel in this moment, which, as hokey as it looked in the original movie, I actually kind of liked. It has a charm to it.
Yeah, that was a movie reference I like deeply appreciated.
I mean, that whole final scene in the original is so weird because it takes forever for like everything to just decompose, and the book itself is even like sticking its tongue out and like swirling it around. It's just like that whole end sequence in the first movie is weird, but I kind of dig it.
Well, I guess for my favorite kill was when the kids become Deadites, and they more or less like conjoin and twist into like this kind of like, it looked a lot like the engineer from the first Hellraiser movie, if that's the best way I can describe it. And they just like go into this room full of elderly people, and they just start like just peeling the skin off of them like a banana. Like a banana is so unsettling, because it's not like your typical, oh, they're skinning them. No, they're tearing it all off until there's like, you can see the guts like fall out, and I'm like, oh, and it's some of the best. This is gonna sound so weird. It's some of the best looking organs spilling out of a body I've seen in a movie.
What they did with the kids wasn't enough. Like, throwing old people into the mix, like, that's also unsettling, because I mean, in some movies, whenever a character is treating an old person badly and it's like they're a nice person, it gets really uncomfortable for me to watch. So here, I was like really unsettled seeing what was happening with the old people in the movie getting peeled and whatnot. So that was something I definitely did not expect. I guess we can go into the ending now if there's nothing else you want to like go over.
No, let's talk about the end.
Okay, so I know I was kind of critical about Ash's return, but and maybe like I'm being hypocritical here, but this return I was really excited about because I wasn't sure if it would happen. It was Mia herself from the 2013 film, and played by Jane Levy again, you know, Zoe's extraordinary playlist herself, and using a chainsaw and teaming up with Ash. And it was really weird. Well, maybe she's from a different dimension or something, because the book can like do that type of thing. But
I just accepted it as, oh, it's just in the same continuity. It was just part of that universe at a different time. And I was like, and yeah, me too. When I saw Mia, I was like, Mia, it's so good to see you.
Yeah, and there was like kind of a goofy joke where she's like, "My name is Mia," and Ash is like as in Mama Mia, like is, and it was kind of a lame like Mama Mia reference, but I did half expect the song to play, but thankfully they like kept it serious and just yeah, like Mia's return was such a fist bump moment for me. I just loved this. Like, I know it's kind of a fan service moment, but I was like, I've waited so long for Mia to return. We've had so much Ash. I'm just happy to like see her again.
Yeah, it is cool, and it's nice to because I don't think any of the diehard Evil Dead like real Evil Dead fans, hated that movie. So, in fact, when she got announced for the video game, people were excited to see her. So it just kind of shows that there's like legit love for that character and that corner of this universe.
Yeah, and so as they're fighting off Deadites, Beth and Ellie get a hold of the book, which has been like levitating and chomping on people this whole time. Like that, they do a lot of things with this book. It like it bites off people's heads as it's flying. But yeah, the sisters get the book and they get these candles and whatnot and try burning it. And in my head, I was thinking, who the hell still uses candles like this often? But again, it was just another one of those things where I was like, okay, I'll just go with it or whatever.
I do think it ends like a little too quickly, but it is a nice little blood tornado at the end. I was like, all right, I'll give you the gore nado.
Yeah, like as they're burning the book, you have that gore NATO, as you call it, and sort of like one last scare, I guess, before like everything calms down. And like, what'd you think of the after effects of like how everyone looks once the book is gone?
I was expecting it to be a little more depressing at the end. Like, it turns out the whole city's like being overrun by deadites. I was half expecting that ending. I was like, huh, we showed restraint here.
How'd you feel about like the final fate of the kids in this movie? How they handled that?
I was like, kids are gonna die in an Evil Dead movie. I accept it.
Yeah, and I mean to be fair, the sisters are still really upset about losing the kids, and you know you get like the authorities arrive on the scene and they see that there are lots of dead people in this building, and they're like, we're not sure if we can explain any of this. And Ash kind of throws out a line where he's like, welcome to my world. And Mia tries to comfort the sisters as like, if anything ever happens, just call me. And it was kind of a depressing ending, but they try to make it a bit triumphant in that the sisters are reunited and they're finally gonna be in touch again. But man, like they had to lose like a bunch of family members for this. It was, yeah, it's like I don't know how you come back for this. You're gonna need a lot of therapy for this type of thing, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because, with Ash, you would think that he would have needed therapy after what happened with his friends and his sister, but here it's like, yeah, like it feels more real that they'll not be okay and have to try to recover from it in therapy or something. Was there anything else you want to go over, or do you want to do final thoughts and score out of 10?
I think we'll go to final thoughts. I don't really have a lot to say. This was actually for all the faults I give it. This is a very straightforward Evil Dead movie, and the fact that we got another Evil Dead movie is nothing short of amazing.
Yeah. So then, what's your score out of 10 and unit of measurement?
I give it a solid 7 chainsaws to the face out of 10. I think it's a by the numbers Evil Dead movie, but sometimes that's all you need. And again, I have to stress the fact that we got another Evil Dead movie that does as much as it does, and the fact that we didn't lose this movie as so many other Evil Dead movies we've lost in the past. This is a miracle, and I hope we get more and not wait for another, 11 years for another thing.
Yeah, hopefully not that long. Yeah, I think I'm kind of with you. Like, it's a miracle that this happened. I'm glad it did. It could have been better, like, for all the reasons that we mentioned. Like, I think I would have been fine without Ash being in this, but bringing Mia back and just some of the effects being so good and if the movie being genuinely scary at points, I think I definitely put this above Army of Darkness, maybe around where I rank the original Evil Dead, but still below Evil Dead 2 and the remake. So I'm gonna give this 7.5 out of 10 Necronomicons.
I like that.
Yeah, so before we close out, something I've been doing for these October episodes is I ask the guests, like, if they have any spooky season recommendations, like for people to watch or read or play. And I don't have like a number limit for this, so it's however many come to mind at this moment. So, what are your spooky season recommendations for like the listeners out there?
So nice you've asked me this. You've asked the right person. Well, my first recommendation is a movie, Dog Soldiers. I don't know if that's been recommended yet as of these recordings. For those who don't know, Dog Soldiers was the first major movie by Neil Marshall. It's basically imagine Predator but with werewolves.
Yeah, I've actually seen Dog Soldiers. I didn't enjoy it as much, but a couple of my friends really liked it, I think. So, hey, maybe it'll be for someone. And do you have any others, or?
This is more of a book, and this is going to be kind of niche, but I think I could put it out there. The book I'm going to recommend to everyone is The Shadow of Frankenstein. It is a Frankenstein novel set in the Universal Monster continuity, and is actually the in-between sequel between Bride of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein. It basically focuses on Henry Frankenstein and his wife going to London. The monster follows, and there he battles Jack the Ripper.
Nice. Yeah, I think my recs for this episode, I'd recommend the book I'm Legend. It's one of my favorite books of all time, probably. I remember finding it like really scary when I read it like 10 years ago or whenever it was, and the ending is very thought-provoking, so it's very good. I've also watched Paper Girls, which I guess technically it begins the morning after Halloween, but it feels kind of eerie at points, and it's a genuinely great show. It's a shame that it got canceled, but it makes me want to read the comics it's based on, which are only 30 issues from what I could tell, and it's not too many, so maybe I'll get into that at some point. Also, just Swamp Thing comics in general, those are a lot of fun. Just, yeah. So, yeah, I guess that'll do it. Thanks for joining me again, Mr. Multiverse. Go ahead and plug your stuff.
My channel is Mr. Multiverse over on YouTube. I also have a Patreon of the same name. I have also written 2 short stories in 2 volumes of Duel of the Monsters. You can find those books on Amazon. If you want to see a vampire and a velociraptor fight, there's your book. I am currently working on a full-length novel that I'm hoping we get a early 2023 publishing date, if all goes well. Other than that, that is all I got.
All right, nice. Yeah, thanks for joining me again. And as for my plugs, I'll just record my plugs later after the fact, like in the edit. So if there's not a smooth transition to that, listeners will know why. Alright, so as for my book, Lemons and Like Rain has been available on Amazon for a while. More info at stevenshinder.com. And the next book, Trespassing Through the Visages, I've been hoping to get out by the end of the year, although because of some stuff that keeps coming up, I do kind of wonder if maybe that will have an early 2023 release. You're bound to see news at some point. Follow me at Steven Shinder on Instagram and Twitter, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook. You can also email Delayed Replay at delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on books with faces. Like, not Facebook, but books with faces. And you can also find me on Yesshift, a vlog/podcast I do with my dad. We've put out quite a bunch of stuff recently. We've been doing a lot together, and yeah, it's just a really packed time, so go check that out to talk about Yes, members of that band as well, and people they've worked with, so lots of great stuff. Guess that'll do it, and without further delay, have a good day.